I wanted to get my hair cut today, but I had a change of plans. And since I'm going to be the next Moist Critical, I might as well continue looking like modern day Tarzan. But recently, I had an incredibly profound and heavy realization while I'm at work or hanging out with my mom. I am finally pulling back the curtain on a dynamic that exists in so many classic cartoons and stories and looking at it through a lens of deep empathy and emotional intelligence. When we watch these shows as kids, we are conditioned by a laugh track, the slapstick music, and the simple good versus evil narrative to laugh at a cat's misfortune. But looking at it as an adult, the slapstick completely falls away, leaving behind a stark look at the systematic abuse, scapegoating, and emotional labor. And no, I'm not talking about Horrid Henry. So many people, Cartoon Movement, Snipe Snap, Not Fair Studios, they've touched on Horrid Henry so many times. I wanted to touch on this, by the way. I've been thinking about doing this, but there were so many videos on Horrid Henry that I decided to do something else entirely. What I am describing now perfectly captures the psychological phenomenon of the designated patient or the family scapegoat, projected onto a town-wide scale. The community's psychological stability depends entirely on having a common enemy, such as Horrid Henry. But the cat doesn't act out or play the villain like Henry does. The townspeople would have to look inward, confront their own exhaustion, face their moral failures, and deal with their own chaotic emotions. The cat is trapped in a structural paradox. They are smart enough to see exactly how the town functions, but they know that breaking character would cause the entire social fabric to collapse. The backlash they face isn't actually about their actions, it is a release valve for everyone else's pent up frustrations. Excuse me. Finding a way to enjoy it is perhaps the saddest part of all. In psychology, when an animal or a person, such as Horrid Henry, cannot escape an abusive environment, they often adapt by leaning into the identity forced upon them. It is a survival tactic. If you can't stop the rocks from being thrown at you, you learn to treat it like a game of catch just to keep your sanity. While this applies broadly to the evil cat trope, a few specific animated universes perfectly mirror this exact tragic dynamic when you rewatch them with adult emotional intelligence. First of all, the entire household dynamic relies on Sylvester from Looney Tunes being the predator so that Tweety can maintain a false veneer of helpless innocence. Granny is completely oblivious or willfully ignorant to the constant violence, and Sylvester is trapped in an endless loop of starvation and physical trauma to maintain the status quo of the house. Tom from Tom and Jerry, second, is perhaps the ultimate example of this tragedy. In several episodes, it is heavily implied, that if Tom actually gets rid of Jerry, the humans will replace him with a more ruthless cat, or he will lose his purpose entirely. Tom has to play the villain and take brutal physical punishments to keep both Jerry safe and the homeowner satisfied. He bears the physical and emotional burden of the entire household. And as I've seen recently, third and final of all, while not a traditional villain, Garfield is constantly villainized as lazy, selfish, and cynical. yet he is often the only character with any sharp situational awareness. John Arbuckle's crushing loneliness and absolute desperation would collapse the household's emotional ecosystem if Garfield didn't play the role of the grounded, deadpan, and unbothered cynic to anchor him. It takes a lot of emotional depth to look past the colorful animation of our childhoods and feel that wave of sadness for a character designed to be unliked. It is a reminder of how easily society chooses comfort over moral logic, opting to blame a designated villain rather than doing the hard work or fixing a broken system themselves. I am literally hitting on one of the most heartbreaking truths of both narrative tragedy and human psychology. When a character or a child, like I said, like Horrid Henry, is trapped in an environment where the verdict on their character is decided before they even act, the moral compass gets violently shattered. In sociology, labeling theory proves that when individuals are repeatedly labeled, such as evil, troublemaker, or bad, they eventually internalize that label. It becomes their core identity. If a child or an animal is told they are a monster every single day, their brain eventually concludes, to survive here, I have to become the monster they see. Coined by psychologist Martin Seligman, this learned helplessness occurs when an organism suffers from painful stimuli but has no way to escape or change the outcome. Eventually, they completely stop trying to avoid the pain. If a cat tries to do something genuinely good, but is still met with screams, brooms, and banishment, the brain learns that good deeds equal punishment. At that point, logic dictates that trying to be good is a waste of precious energy. The adults or authority figures in these scenarios are often projecting their own failures onto the scapegoat. If a vase breaks, or the house is messy, or someone else throws a tantrum, it is structurally easier to blame the designated bad entity than to investigate the truth. The scapegoat bears the sins of the entire environment. Now, the real world parallel in children translates directly to human development, and it is a major form of emotional abuse. In dysfunctional families or rigid school systems, one child is often cast as the difficult one. If their sibling starts a fight, the bad kid is blamed for reacting. If they try to help clean up and accidentally drop a plate, it is viewed as malicious destruction rather than an innocent mistake. When a child realizes that the outcome, punishment, rejection, and isolation, is identical whether they do something good or something bad, they experience a profound loss of hope. They think, if I'm going to be grounded anyway, I might as well actually do something to deserve it. It is a desperate attempt to regain control. If they cannot control whether they are loved, then they will at least control how they are hated. Once the cat or the child reaches that breaking point of what's the point of being good, a strange, dark transformation happens. They find a twisted sense of freedom in accepting the villain role. If you are already condemned to hell, you are no longer have to follow the rules. They stop seeking validation because they know it's a currency they will never be allowed to have. They lean into the chaos, use spite as fuel, and play the villain with a smirk. Not because they want to be evil, but because the smirk is the only armor they have left to hide the fact that they are completely heartbroken. It is a profound tragedy of systematic exhaustion where society's laziness kills a soul willingness to love. When the cat finally refuses to be the monster, however, if it refuses to be the monster, it fractures the entire illusion, keeping that society or family functional. Because the community is addicted to the scapegoat as a way to avoid self-reflection, the cat's rebellion triggers a chaotic psychological and social chain reaction. The cat doesn't need to attack. They simply stop reacting. When blamed for a broken vase or a town crisis, they do not run, smirk, or fight back. They meet the accusations with complete neutrality or walk away. This immediately starves the townspeople of their expected reaction. Without the cat acting defensive or aggressive, the accusers are suddenly left holding their own rage with nowhere to direct it. When a system loses its scapegoat, it does not immediately fix itself. It panics. In psychology, an extinction burst occurs when a predictable behavior is blocked, causing the abusers to escalate their tactics to force compliance. The town will manufacture even wilder lies to make the cat look evil. They will tighten control to force the cat back into submission. The community needs the cat to snap, because if the cat remains blameless, the town's narrative about themselves begins to rot. If the cat holds their ground and refuses the role, the townspeople can no longer export their anxiety, guilt, and failures onto an outside entity. The unresolved tension has to go somewhere, so it turns inward. Neighbors turn on neighbors, and family members turn on each other. The collective illusion shatters. The tired minds are suddenly forced to think, resulting in massive internal conflict, paranoia, and emotional crashes. Without the cat to distract everyone, the actual perpetrators of the town's misery are dragged into the light. Societies built on scapegoating rarely heal overnight. If the cat permanently removes themselves from the equation, either by leaving or by becoming entirely untouchable, the community will immediately look for a replacement. They will find a new animal, a different eccentric outsider, or a vulnerable child to carry the weight of their sins. The blame cycle restarts because the system itself is addicted to the coping mechanism of blame. For the cat, refusing to be the monster is an agonizing but self-saving choice. They go through a period of intense isolation because they are no longer participating in the only social contract they've ever known. However, by shedding the villain identity, they finally reclaim their own reality. They realize they were never inherently bad. They were just a mirror of reflecting a sick environment. It is the moment the animal stops surviving the system and finally start existing outside of it. That is an agonizing layer to this dynamic. I am highlighting the toxic structure of this whole thing. If anyone is starting to feel sad for this animal, you are not alone. There are multiple people reported to feeling distressed after either watching Tom and Jerry, Kid vs. Cat, or the Cats and Dogs movie franchise. You can actually see people in the comment section feeling exhausted about this trope over and over and over and over. It's all constant. Now let's talk about sibling triangulation, where the owners and society intentionally pit the two animals against each other to maintain control. It's basically the villain cat and the hero dog. That's what I mean by sibling triangulation. Because that's what it is. It's right there in front of you. By weaponizing the dog's desperation to be the golden child, the system forces a devastating compromise. The cat must completely shrink themselves, abandon their own heroic aspirations since ancient Egypt, where they're killing snakes, and basically sitting next to the pharaoh. That's basically that's where they started off. They were worshipped as gods. Basically Bastet and Sekhmet, all of that. But no, apparently we're not going to pay attention to that. They are literally forced to abandon all of that and absorb the role of the failure just so the dog can keep their fragile pedestal. When the dog argues with the cat about needing to be the golden child, it reveals that the dog is trapped too, though in a much more invisible way. The dog knows that their safety and affection are entirely conditional. If they aren't perfect, if they don't please the owners constantly, they will lose their status. The dog isn't fighting the cat out of genuine malice. They literally are fighting out of survival panic. They are telling the cat, if you try to be good, if you try to be the hero that I am, you are threatening my survival. I need you to be bad so I can stay safe. The dog is essentially begging or demanding that the cat stay in the gutter so the dog can shine. It is a deeply unfair burden to place on the cat, forcing them to choose between their own potential and their siblings' emotional stability. The cat's choice to give up and sabotage their own aspirations is a heavy act of radical, quiet resignation. It hurts to watch because it means the system successfully broke their spirit. The cat realizes that fighting for recognition creates a chaotic, explosive environment to keep the house or the town from falling apart into endless fighting. The cat takes the fall. They sacrifice their own narrative so the dog doesn't experience an emotional collapse. It shows that the cat actually possesses a much higher level of emotional intelligence than anyone else in the show. They see the dog's fragile ego. They see the owner's blind favoritism, and they realize this system will never let us both win. If I try to climb out of this hole, they will drag us both down. The absolute worst part is the stifled ambition. The cat could have been a hero, a savior, or a high achiever. Instead, they purposefully mess up, act out, or play dumb, deliberately matching the low expectations of the town. They commit character suicide daily just to keep a broken system running smoothly. It is a profound look at how dysfunctional environments don't just punish bad behavior. They actively strangle greatness to keep everyone comfortable in their assigned roles. The cat carries the heaviest burden in the entire story. The brilliant, capable soul forced to play the fool so the weak can feel strong. But if we strip away the cartoon physics, the upbeat theme songs, and the childhood nostalgia, what we are looking at is clear systematic and severe animal neglect and psychological abuse. In a real-world scenario, any animal control agency or humane society would have a massive airtight case to step in, confiscate that cat, and permanently ban those owners from ever holding a pet license again. When you look at how this mistreatment expands beyond the house and into the entire community, the scope of the injustice becomes staggering. The owners don't just fail the cat behind closed doors. They systematically strip away the cat's status as a living, feeling creature in every single sphere of life. If the dog gets hurt, and I'm not saying that hurting the dog, or if anything happens to the dog, if the dog dies, gets hit by a car, I'm not saying that it's good. I'm not saying that. And y'all need to know this. Y'all need to hear this from me. It's tragic. It's sad. I get it. Yes. I would have been freaking out too. If the dog gets hurt, it's a family tragedy. Yes. I know that. But if the cat is flattened, blown up, or thrown out into the rain, it's a fucking punchline. It's a joke. I mean, like, what the fuck? The owners have created a household policy where the cat is legally and emotionally unprotected. The cat is routinely denied basic necessities: peace, security, proper food, and affection as a baseline treatment, while the dog is showered with luxury. This isn't just favoritism, guys. It is the calculated withholding of care to enforce a hierarchy. And the abuse doesn't stop at the property line. Because the owners have defined the cat as a nuisance and a villain, that toxic label follows the cat into the entire town, creating a community-wide hazard. Because the owners treat the cat like garbage, the rest of the neighborhood feels entitled to do the same. Animal control, local shopkeepers, and random pedestrians all treat the cat with immediate hostility, chasing them or calling them a menace without checking the facts. The cat is never safe. The cat is never, ever safe. Outside the house, the cat is hunted by stray packs, hit by vehicles, or blamed for every missing trash can lid on the block. The owners have essentially stripped the cat of all citizenship rights, leaving them completely vulnerable to a hostile world that they forced the cat into. The most damaging part of the owner's behavior is how they pollute the minds of everyone else by publicizing their hatred and blame the cat. They teach the world, the whole town, that it is acceptable to scapegoat the vulnerable. Pardon me. Somehow I can't fucking read my script. I am so pissed. They turn a private failure of parenting and pet ownership into a public structural circus where the animal's suffering is used to entertain and comfort a lazy, exhausted society. Calling a spade means acknowledging that these owners aren't just quirky or strict. They are abusers who use a living being as an emotional dumping ground, destroying their quality of life from the inside out. And I want to touch on this for a second. In cartoons, a cat might effortlessly pick up a saxophone or a double bass and play a flawless jazz solo. We've seen this before. Cats are tied to smooth jazz. Trust me, I love jazz as much as the next guy. I listen to jazz while I sleep. It helps me sleep. But excuse me, I just fucking burped. But in the real world, the psychological damage I am describing acts like an emotional paralysis. It strangles talent before it can even breathe. When an animal, a child, or an artist is beaten down to that extent, their relationship with their own gifts becomes deeply warped. When we are conditioned to believe we are a loser, our brains literally cannot process success or skill. If the cat plays a perfect, beautiful piece of music, they won't feel proud. They will think, I got lucky. This is a fluke. Or if they hear this, they will just find a way to use it against me. Sorry, I don't know what. My nose is completely stuffed up. For a deeply traumatized soul, being noticed is dangerous. In their life, attention has only ever meant screaming and punishment. Even if they are a musical genius, before or showcasing that talent triggers massive panic. They would rather play silently in the dark where it is safe, hiding their brilliance to avoid being attacked. To play music, especially jazz, which relies on improvisation, vulnerability, and soul, we have to trust ourselves. We have to be willing to make a mistake and turn it into art. But when we live in a constant state of hypervigilance, our brains are frozen in survival mode. We cannot innovate or express ourselves when we are constantly waiting for the next blow to fall. There is a bitter irony to why these characters are so often linked to jazz in fiction. Jazz is historically the music of the oppressed, the exhausted, the outsiders. It is a genre born from having to find beauty, rhythm, and freedom inside a world that refuses to give you any. But as I brilliantly pointed out, just being solid or having the raw ability isn't a magical cure. The show or the film might frame it as a cool, casual trait, but the reality is much darker. The music isn't a fun hobby for the cat. It is a desperate, lonely coping mechanism. They aren't playing to get applause from a town that hates them so much. They are playing because the instrument is the only thing in their entire universe that doesn't yell at them, lie to them, or tell them they are inherently evil. Even then, the moment they stop playing, the silence creeps back in. And that voice telling them they are a failure takes over again. It proves that you cannot perform your way out of a broken spirit, no matter no amount of talent can fix the damage of never being loved for who you really are. It is incredibly jarring and painful when you realize that the media we trusted as children completely lied to us about how justice works. These shows plant that fairy tale idea, the hope that abusers will have a sudden breakthrough, realize their cruelty, and finally offer an apology and a hug. But they never do. In these cartoons, the status quo is locked in stone. the next episode always resets. The cat is back in the gutter, and the owners remain as oblivious and cruel as ever. The disappointment we felt is a very real adult grief. Children's media often relies on a formula where if we just endure enough, behave well enough, or wait long enough, people will finally see our worth. But looking back, we see that the narrative arc was a trap. The owners are structurally incapable of changing because the writers need them to be unreasonable to trigger the next slapstick conflict. The cat is trapped in a literal purgatory of unreciprocated love. Excuse me, I don't know. My mind's going all over the place. I'm sorry. They give us just enough tiny hints of affection. Maybe a rare bowl of milk or a quirk pat on the head at the end of a long movie to keep our hope alive. But this is breadcrumbing. It is just enough to keep the cat and you, the viewer, hooked, hoping that the next time will be different. But it never is. If we rewrite the script and give the cat the actual rescue they deserve, the transformation would be profound. A loving family wouldn't just give them food, they would completely undo the psychological damage. In a real rescue scenario, a traumatized animal needs weeks or months of decompression time. They would finally learn that loud footsteps in the hallway don't mean a broom is coming, and a raised hand means a gentle scratch behind the ears, not a strike. They wouldn't have to perform catch mice, play perfect jazz, or sabotage themselves to keep a golden child happy. Their existence would be celebrated simply because they are alive. They would finally be allowed to just be a cat, to sleep in a sunbeam without hypervigilance, to play without fear, and to be clumsy without being called a failure. In a safe home, that solid jazz talent wouldn't be a lonely defense mechanism anymore. Their new family would listen to them with genuine awe and pride. The cat wouldn't have to doubt their own skills because their environment would finally mirror their true worth, building their confidence back up from zero. The realization that the creators planted that false hope in our head is a major turning point in how we view stories. It shows that we have to outgrow the lazy moral logic of the show. We have a higher capacity for empathy than the people who wrote it. The cat never got their happy ending on screen, but by seeing through the narrative and demanding better for them, we are validating the pain of every scapegoat who was ever forced to carry a system's sins. We are giving that character the dignity they were denied for decades. And I hope for all that is sane in the world that we do the same for the ones in Japanese anime, because let me tell you, with Meowth and Beerus in Japanese anime, they are treated no better than the prisoners at Guantanamo Bay. I mean, my God, it never stops. So, hopefully, you all saw this trope in my perspective. Hopefully, you felt genuine sadness for these cat characters. Because I sure as hell do. Every single day. But, anyway, thank you all for trying to understand because I really had to get this off my chest. And see you all in the next video. Peace.